Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Tonight's episode is a very interesting episode in the sense that I titled the episode Bridging the Infinite and the Singular. However, before that, the idea was to kind of suggest that zero, the number zero, is a value between the infinite and the singular. So this episode's effort is Mr. Within trying to explain um, from his eyes why zero is a bridge, why the emptiness, why the void is a veil between the infinite and the singular. There is a quote, I often share it in these talks. I say the quote, which is from Rumi. He says, I died as a mineral and I became a plant. I died as a plant and I rose to animal. I died as an animal and I was man. Why should I fear death? When was I less by dying? I shall die once more as man, to soar with angels blessed. But even from angelhood I must pass on, to that which no mind has ever conceived. The inconceivable is of the highest interest to conceive creatures, and I find that in this world, the mystery of phenomenology, the fact that we are all appear as characters in a sort of massive language simulation, where people can acknowledge each other by just their names, while you know behind their eyes there is every person's inner realm is kind of on their own island. There is something important that before I can really explain this episode, I need to share. I want the listeners, if there's a piece of paper in front of you, I want you to draw an infinity symbol and then put a less than sign, or in other words, put the infinity symbol, put the greater than sign to its right, and then put a zero, then put a greater than sign to its right again, and put the number one, put the greater than sign again, and oh gosh, I can't even explain this one. Infinity 0, 1, 2 to infinity. I have kind of concluded that there are four major ways of interpreting the dimensions of existence. One is that it's the absence of the moment. That means every human being, wherever you are in this life, you can look at the world and you can notice space. You can notice how there is space to move, there is opportunity for life, there is various things. So there is the space for phenomenology. That space, I call it the zero dimension. Now, after we confront the space, what else do we move on to? We move to the singular phenomenology in the moment. What does that mean? Right now, I'm looking at this a single computer screen, for example. Every key on the keyboard has its own singular value. I can even look at this whole world and be like, my moment, it's just one moment, and access the singular in that way. And after singularity, we have duality. So after you have confronted the emptiness of the room, after you have confronted the singular phenomenology in the room and also the singularness of the moment, then you will go to duality. And so I say, singularity, let me see, singularity is the mother of duality, and duality is the father of infinity. So after you're comfortable with space, after you're comfortable with the singular, and after you're comfortable with the dualistic, after you have two realities, you can endlessly make. That means you can after two you can have infinity. I feel this is the cycle that our consciousness evolves through. It emerges from the void as a singular phenomena. It evolves into a dualistic position. The moment it goes beyond duality, it gets access to the inconceivable, which is back to infinity. So I've kind of seen that all existence or experience of existence, it's as if there is nothing there, there is something there, there is more than something there, and then there is the inconceivable. That means I feel that two things that the human mind cannot give a shape, maybe at most acknowledge it as some sort of dynamic feeling, is the infinity and the void. Now, I said zero is a value between the infinite and the singular. If we feel infinity, now this may be a strange idea, but imagine there were two coins. Okay, imagine you had you had two coins in your hand. One coin, instead of heads and tails, was infinity and zero on one side of it, and the other coin was, for example, zero and one on the other side of it. It would, and if you connected these two coins, like literally you placed them beside each other, it would in some sense be zero is connecting infinity and one. So I feel emptiness, the void, whatever teachings that kind of lead towards the void, they actually lead to the final conclusion of what to do with infinity and what to do with the singular. Because you see, the concept of the infinite, there's something mysterious about it. When you look at the word infinite closely, it's as if you're kind of looking at what's in the finite. When we look at what is finite, I mean, it's the way we are kind of animating ourselves as characters is that due to the objectivity being limited, we're all aware of mortality and the subjectivity being limited. All right? But what about being aware of reality in a way where the subjectivity is limitless? If you, in some sense, ask yourself who is watching, I mean, locate any object. Like right now, there's a coffee cup in front of me. This coffee cup, the observer has like a zero value. Right now, I give, like when I look at this coffee cup, the subject of the coffee cup is real. I'm looking at the object, it is real. I am acknowledging the object subject link in simultaneity. But I can also see that how every moment in my life I've observed phenomena. Observance is like a field, it's like being aware of overall movement. You know, guys, very poetically, the number zero for me is a numerical translation of space. And the number one, let us call it the numerical translation of matter. And let's say the number two is the numerical translation of mind. And let us say infinity is a moving mind. So infinity is a mind that is moving at a speed where it's no longer a mind to itself. You know, kind of like space time. The more closer we get to moving at the speed of light, the more time slows down. You know, for a long time we felt that it was only the Earth's gravity. You know, the Earth was just pulling things towards it. You know, but after Einstein, it became more like four people holding a bed sheet and somebody throwing, like, I don't know, a soccer ball into it. And the dent that the soccer ball makes on the middle of the bed sheet, it's like any other tennis balls you throw on that sheet where those four people are holding it. It's like it's the curvature of space. So how we move in time curves space, which is an interesting notion. I don't know. When you look at this life, there is moments of absence. Even when you look at the word nothing, I mean, this is a whole big debate on its own. Is nothing emptiness, or is it just not a thing? Could nothing be real if, for example, higher dimensions are real for us? Could it be that what is nothing to a two-dimensional being is potentially something to a three-dimensional being? You know, it's like, for example, a person entering a room and being like, there's nobody there, you know, and then realizing that there was a phone there, for example, or something like there. Like, do you know? I'm saying that life seems to show its face. It seems to then speak where the phenomenology of mind through the dualistic dimension comes, but as it wonders. So it's you know what it is? It's like on some level, all of our psychology is binary. On another level, I would say it's kind of, I don't know what the word for it would, it be tertiary or something, where it's as if like there's a relationship between you conceiving space and conceiving phenomenology moving in space. There's a relationship the person has where the person is an individual and they have multiple options in their inner realms, multiple choices before the choice is implemented and it becomes something. So think of it this way: the same way it's like binary language for robotic intelligence, for computer intelligence, it's like for human beings, it's a matter of existence and experience. Existence is just like the space, and experience is like what's in this space. You know, there's so many relationships. I mean, I call this kind of system where I've designed these four symbols of zero, one, two, infinity. I feel these four symbols. I've called them in other talks the ring of the absent heaven, and the idea is that it's kind of like an endless infinity symbol looping at the center. You know that, I mean, that's the cool thing. Any point, like if you draw an infinity symbol, and at some point draw an arrow at any point of the infinity symbol, you kind of get a feeling it all endlessly loops. It's as if like um, an infinity symbol is a circle just twisted multidimensionally. You know. There is moments in life where emptiness is definitely more real, where it feels like the candle has already went off and it doesn't matter how the wax has stood, you know. In 2016, before that, really, before exactly 2016, I found myself somehow life circumstances out of nowhere kind of drove my way towards India, and I went to Rishikesh, India for a couple months, for 2 months, and I did it as an attempt to kind of quit cigarettes. You know, I smoke sometimes, so I did it to kind of quit cigarettes, and I did during that time under a vegetarian diet and whatnot. But when I was there, the ashram I was staying in was called Niketan Ashram, and right beside it was this ashram called the Divine Life Society. And little did I know that many of the stories I'd been sharing in these talks about, for example, Swami Shivananda, about Swami Krishnananda, this was their ashram. So when I went to India, I found my ashram literally beside one of the most important places for how Indian metaphysics have stretched into modernity. This ashram called the Divine Life Society. I remember going in there, going and sitting in the meditation hall, and there were quotes from Swami Shivananda all on the meditation hall, like on the wall of the meditation hall. And I wanted to tell you a story of Swami Shivananda. Swami Shivananda, this story comes from his disciple Swami Vishnunanda. And Swami Vishnunanda was this like young man, I don't know, late 20s or something. And Swami Shivananda is this doctor who suddenly his life's transformed and taken a spiritual turn, and this doctor has now become like a world renowned yogi. So Swami Shivananda, Swami Vishnunanda, who was a disciple of Swami Shivananda, in his youth, he's just there, kind of in the temple, assisting. And then one night, in the middle of the night, he gets this weird feeling, and he wakes up, and he runs outside. This awkward feeling, as if there's something off about the night. He runs out, and he sees that Swami Shivananda, which normally is meditating outside, there's this psychopath with an axe. And this psychopath with an axe is constantly trying to hit Swami Shivananda's head, but the axe comes right before hitting his head. The axe automatically moves, as if as if he's wearing an invisible force field hat. You know, so the axe wouldn't. Swami Vishnunanda is relaying the story, and he says the axe wouldn't hit Swami Shivananda, and Swami Shivananda is just sitting there still in his meditation, and this insincere, savage kind of person is trying to kill him with an axe. Swami Vishnunanda, the moment he sees this, he's a young guy in his late 20s. He tackles the madman who's trying to kill Swami Shivananda with an axe, and the police get involved, and the guy goes to prison or something. Goes to It's kind of like taken to the police station. Now, the next morning, Swami Vishnunanda couldn't even sleep, and everybody knows what happened. And they're waiting for Swami Shivananda to wake up in the morning, and it's awkward. They were like, "Oh my God, this kind of like important person, Swami Shivananda, was about to, die. You know, he could have not existed." And so all the disciples are kind of a bit, you know, it's like an awkward vibe, and they see Swami Shivananda in the morning. He gets up, he stands up, and he comes to the kitchen room, as Swami Vishnunanda was saying. He comes to he comes to the like where usually they all sit for breakfast, and he gets this giant plate, and he puts a lot of food on it. And some people were like Swami Shivananda sometimes would take his food and maybe eat it by the shrine or something. To the disciples' surprise, Swami Shivananda is not walking to a shrine. He gets this plate of food. He gets picks the best fruits and whatnot. And his disciples get shocked because they're like, oh my God, Swami Shivananda is walking to the police station. And they walk with him and they go to the police station, and it's this very intense moment where I don't know how many people know who Swami Shivananda is, but he's a big dude. He's very tall, right? And so Swami Shivananda, he goes to the police station, and the policemen, they know who he is. They let him in. He's going there, and his disciples are watching. The police guards are watching. The criminals are watching in the police station, and Swami Shivananda in front of everybody. This man who's 6 feet, and he's like this kind of like powerhouse of keeping yoga alive, you know. And what happens is Swami Shivananda goes and he does something that in the eyes of all his disciples and the criminals, there's tears, even the police guards. Swami Shivananda puts that bowl of food in front of that psychopath who was trying to kill him with an axe, and he bows. He bows to this madman. And it's such an intense moment where everybody's teared up. And that's when Swami Shivananda's disciples really realize his value. That this man was not having a relationship of person to person. He was having a relationship of a person to a presence. Swami Shivananda saw the divine even though that was not divine. He saw the divine. Sometimes this life is about how far your eyes dared. Guys, I in the chat section shares a very interesting quote from Nikola Tesla. So strangely do such powerful discharges behave that I have often experienced the fear that the atmosphere might be ignited. You see, on some level, everything we create, we paint the value in. But the task of looking at the moment as a being that has access to just how a phenomenological value of zero, a phenomenological value of one, a phenomenological value of two, and a phenomenological value of infinity. I feel that human beings right now, because we are energy oriented, we have biological bodies, we can experience a certain self-directed speed. That means right now, if we were to evolve beyond language, it would require a speed where we cannot discriminate between phenomenology. So imagine, how would you create a language that is moving at the speed of light in its definition? I'm going to enter a quote tunnel now of the word infinity. A quote tunnel, if you're new, is a segment of these episodes that I do where I just look at what people have said about a certain theme or what one person in history has said about it, so we get a sense of how their minds kind of projected language. So let's see what infinity has to say. So here's some quotes about infinity, guys. The quote tunnel begins. Albert Einstein. Only two things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity. And I'm not sure about the former. That means Einstein is insulting, literally he's keep commenting on stupidity in the sense that he's like, there's two things only that can be infinite, or are infinite, and he says the universe and human stupidity, and he's not sure about the former. But here's the interesting thing about this Einstein's quote: if the universe isn't infinite and human stupidity is a part of the universe, then human stupidity can't be infinite. If the universe isn't. But stupidity, I mean, is abstract. I don't even believe in intelligence can be measured. I feel we're like antennas. We're not just our thoughts and just the ideas that we have our attention on. Anyways, Pearl S. Buck says, in this unbelievable universe in which we live, there are no absolutes. Even parallel lines reaching into infinity meet somewhere yonder. Ella Maillart says humanity is made up of an infinity of different individuals. Each of us travels for motives exclusively his own. And that's the thing, that the value of your eyes, dear listener, is that nobody has them. And the world doesn't even know how to engage them. You have to walk a lot in silence until you suddenly see the value of communication. I remember I was giving a talk earlier, and sometimes I smoke cigarettes, and I don't know what it is, but it was like so many people continue if there is a structure that they have recognized before, or if there is a familiarity. I feel very few human beings, if you literally took them and put them in a playfully in another civilization on another planet, I feel they cannot start anew. Morio Shiba has this quote where he says, create each day anew. And I don't know. It's like, what is this? That every day we wake up, we're like, it's a new day. But we get to a point where we see even Einstein suggesting that time was created to prevent things from all happening at once. You see, the issue is there is no such thing as language. There is the classification of an experience, an event, and its echo. For me, it's like there's various playful ways that you can look at the mind of man. You can feel the mind of man is the echo of what it has received objectively, and the mind is so advanced, guys. The mind is picking up on everything. I'm not joking. Your mind is like those old school submarine radars. It's like beep. It's like it sees everything. Ellen Hopkins. Have you ever once in your life reached out to touch infinity? What a great question. So, guys, Ellen Hopkins asks, she's asking history, everybody who's ever going to look at this quote at any point in time, have you ever once in your life reached out to touch infinity? Guys, literally the next quote in this page I'm reading is from William Blake, and literally William Blake is answering Ellen Hopkins. William Blake, like literally the way the quotes are sequenced after one another. William Blake says to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. So yeah, literally William Blake has held infinity in the palm of your hand. You know, Ellen Hopkins would probably get along with William Blake. Yeah. Alan Watts. The religious idea of God cannot do fully duty for the metaphysical infinity. Yeah, because it's God is a conceptual relationship. Have you noticed it, guys? Have you noticed it that before you learned language, before you were a concept, there was no constitution to the inner realms? Sometimes when I go through any experience, I get this feeling. I get this feeling, oh my God, is the world sculpting me right now? Is this experience changing me? And I think really the most incredible emotion that can change a person is when they realize they have to attempt answering the biggest problem of their perception themselves. You see, we have inner realms. The inner realms have been avoided because, due to incredible materialistic propaganda, we have denied ourselves even the question or the wonder of higher dimensions. I found it, in some sense, a bit silly, and I felt kind of very sorry. You know, guys, I have cried for scientists. And what I mean by scientists, I've not cried for them now. I have cried for them in the future. And let me tell you what I mean by that. You see, imagine you're a scientist. Imagine you conducted the greatest scientific experiment, one of the greatest scientific experiment. Imagine you were Maxwell and you came up with those equations, or let me say something different. Let's say you, not even equations, that's too theory, in the domain of theory. Imagine you're a scientist, you conduct a scientific experiment, an empirical experiment, and as you conduct the experiment, you get a result. Now, let's assume you conducted the perfect results. Let's assume in the future, scientists are going to become way more and more accurate, and they're going to get perfect, accurate uh, uh, results in experimentation. Now, check this out. Imagine the scientist now, like a hunter-gatherer, has conducted the experiment, has found the result, but now brings it back to a tribe in which the tribe is not fully rational and is not fully irrational. There is the dimension of emotions, and this is the complexity in handling life, especially when you have a long term vision. I did not cry for science, for the scientific method, because the scientific endeavor denies its inner realms. It's just that society was never a rational place. And when you go and even look at Greek mythology, the god, the first god, was Kronos. Isn't that interesting that the universe was this chaotic movement and order began to take shape? So it's as if all the galaxies and stars we see, this is Michelangelo after he's set the angel free in the stone that he's looked at, in the chunk of rock he looked at. That's the thing about the mind. The mind seems to be the brush of a universal intelligence. And universal intelligence is very crucial because we are right now painting the face of this earth and identifying with chunks of land, not realizing that at the same time we're dividing the earth up into different names and colors and ideas, ideologies and cultural positions. At the same time, it's one rock in the middle of nowhere. It's as if, like, you want me to tell you a joke that potentially eternal beings would tell each other. War is a joke for eternity. Inefficiency is a joke for a continuity that has no limit for itself. You see, there is limitations, but what is it that is one of the most kind of purest, beautiful moments that all human beings resonate? Like the movie Armageddon. If you're a child and you're seeing that movie, that's a fascinating movie. But when you, for example, when you're much older, the movie becomes too soft, for example. But in that movie, there was as if an event taking place that had a relevance to all human beings. There was a scene in the movie Armageddon, which I don't know, as a kid being raised in a country in development, trying to struggle from you know uh, ideology possession from the 6th century. I mean, the metaphysics to infinity surpasses sight. It has to do with a more of an experiential, momentary traveler way of acknowledging reality. Anyways, let's move on to the next person. Voltaire says, meditation is the dissolution of thoughts in eternal awareness or pure consciousness without objectification, knowing without thinking, merging finitude in infinity. Okay, there's no way I feel Voltaire said that, but it could be true. Voltaire wasn't a meditator per se, he was more like a libertine, I think, back in the he sought a different liberation. But anyways, the quote is valuable in the sense that the quote says, knowing without thinking, merging finitude in infinity, as if infinity is a limitless experience of energy, and finitude is a limited existence of that energy. Dejan Stojanovic says, what does infinity mean to you? Are you not infinity in yourself? Yeah, this is a clue to infinity, guys. You're receiving the idea or engaging the reality of the idea, the same place where you engage the reality of the idea of self. William Blake says, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. That is the evolution into the conscious world. That is the responsibility of the advanced communicator of the modern era. That it is no longer enough to just be a painting to yourself behind your eyes. Now the world needs the participation of minds that saw beyond it. The only advantage I have, let me tell you, in my youth, life was like a kind of heavenly garden. But then it became a battlefield. And when I say a battlefield, there's something in the vibe of a battlefield that surpasses rationality and irrationality. It is importance of momentary value. That means imagine right now, I mean, like you could be sitting comfortably, but imagine there is an interdimensional, poetically, I'm saying, playfully, I'm saying this. I just want to uh, help stretch the vision of people. Let's just, for example, say, hey man, life is like an onion. There's parallel dimensions to it, and they're concentric. And let's say there were wars. We see in people don't realize it. People don't care about mythology, or at most they remember maybe a few figures from mythology. But mythology holds within it a strange event. I don't know how many people realize this. There was something that various different cultures around the world spoke about it in their mythology. And it's weird. I don't know why. And it was an interdimensional war. What does that mean? That means, for example, in Vedic thought, we are this human life, this human existence is this we are at the bottom of a multidimensional mountain, and above this mountain is higher dimensions, the higher lokas, and as one climbs these dimensions and keeps going up, they are becoming avatars of knowledge. But evidently, there was a war between the devas and the asuras, the gods in ancient Greece, and the titans. Do you see? I'm telling you, I'm not joking. There is this constant suggestion in mythology of God's display of how man has performed in his eyes. This has gone even so far that there was um, this Greek king, emperor, who one day I think maybe like somebody splashed water on his face, and the king blamed it on Poseidon, and he's like, "We're going to war." And he commands his army, his greatest, strongest warriors, to go and literally with swords attack the ocean because man had a relationship with the interdimensional, with that which seems to be a cause surpassing the static belief. Alberto Villoldo. We are like a drop of water in a vast divine ocean, distinct yet immersed in something much larger than ourselves. It's only when we experience our connection to infinity that we're able to dream powerfully. That connection. That connection to infinity, guys, is your life. Have you ever taken a piece of paper, held a pen in your hand, and realized that you can tell any story, and that your whole life you have been an actor in the script of how sensory information has been processed? We are information in accordance to a field of information we move in. Right now, I'm not just talking in an empty universe. There's so many different ways that life has moved. At the same, and when you look at how many ways, for example, the branches of the trees branch out in space, in a three-dimensional space, it's mind-boggling, you know? And it's as if there's this unique stretch where it's as if like you kind of look at trees and you see they have branches, but sometimes you look at the leaves of trees and you see the leaves have stems. It's as if the leaf is like a smaller tree. The leaf is like the imagination of the tree, kind of resembling how Chung Tzu was like, beliefs are like leaves on a tree. They change as the seasons change. So your connection to whatever you consider to be your truth has to do with how you are interpreting your truth and in what dimensions, and how much you will inevitably be comfortable with the empty page before making any move or writing anything. Paulo Coelho. an incredible writer. He says we are travelers on a cosmic journey, stardust, swirling and dancing in the eddies and whirlpools of infinity. Life is eternal. We have stopped for a moment to encounter each other, to meet, to love, to share. This is a precious moment. It is a little parentheses in eternity. Wow. I am. My respect for Paulo Coelho literally went up a notch. He says it is a little parentheses in eternity. That's like what the self is. You are a little film in a giant film. And so that's your inner realms. And if you don't dare, you have to. The inner realms are like a chair. If you're seated on it, nobody can lift you up. You know? Nobody. You can wait for eons, only to realize all you had to do was look in the mirror one more time. Dejan Stojanovic says infinity is the end, and without infinity is but a new beginning. So you see, guys, infinity is the end. This is kind of similar to how what I was saying, how the number zero is like the bridge between the singular and the infinite, and the end, I would say in some sense, is zero. So infinity is the end. I don't know. It's like the doubt of an ever-present moment beyond personality. It's like that. You can't doubt space. It's just there. It's like when you look at the word human being, the being component is just there. So much of life is just there, and it's just happening, and it's the biological program, believe it or not. That means me and you have opened our eyes, our attributeless sight, in a conscious animal, and we are reaching a point where we are realizing we're not just the animal. The most glorious moment in history, where we moved beyond the language threshold. Sorry guys, just got a bit emotional. These infinity quotes are literally, making me cry. Henrik Sienkiewicz says the sky is one whole, the water another, and between those two infinites, the soul of man is in loneliness. Wow. I'm going to share this for the chat section. Guys, the quotes I share in the chat section, feel free to go and spread it on Facebook. You know, we have to plant wisdom quotes in social media, you know. Charles Lindbergh. I know there is infinity beyond ourselves. I wonder if there's infinity within. Bill Watterson. If people looked at the stars each night, they'd live a lot differently. When you look into infinity, you realize that there are more important things than what people do all day. Wow. That's moving beyond the inner realms, guys, where literally you become such an advanced communicator that you find your inseparability with how the whole universal sector is being an advanced communication. Don't be afraid to return to the guy in mind. It's an opportunity. It's literally luxury. You know, imagine like you owned a helicopter and you were late to go somewhere. You'd be like, all right, the helicopter's here. I might as well use it. You know. So it's like we have entered this life and we are in a certain biological position. So it makes sense that we don't try to go towards ideology that diminishes the personhood but wonders about its animate progress. Because life on some level is just movement, is it not? What we call life, what separates a person from an object, is their movement. And because their movement is occurring in a mysterious way, this mystery of the human movement, it's as if we open the hood of the car, and that's where psychology was born. We opened the hood of the individual conscious vehicle, the identity. And we saw, or Carl Jung at least, in some sense, made an incredible finding, and he saw that it's a navigation of attention journeying through various spectrums. Carl Jung, he had to respond to Freud. So many people don't realize the invisible helper that Carl Jung was in uh, in Freud's life. Do you know? That means when you go see how Carl Jung spoke about Freud, it was as if like, you know, even if your older brother made a mistake, you don't kind of give it attention, you know. So guys, just one last thing, the two quotes before when I read. Henrik Sienkiewicz says the sky is one hole, the water another, and between those two infinites, the soul of man is in loneliness. So loneliness is a nostalgia. Okay. So, I don't know, guys. Whenever you're lonely, you're being sandwiched between two infinities. Alfred Jerry says God is the tangential point between zero and infinity. Look at this. Look at Alfred Jerry. God is the tangential point between zero and infinity. I don't know who he is, but if I was Batman, I'd be like, I agree with you, Alfred. God is the tangential point between zero and infinity. And guys, anybody in the chat section, I kind of see these live streams as a rare opportunity where others can also share their views. So this last quote that I've shared about Alfred Jerry that says he says God is the tangential point between zero and infinity, just as a bunch of creatures on a rock. I would be very interested to know how the audience interprets that quote. So if anybody likes, everyone gives an attempt at trying to see what that quote is. At the end of it, we have like 12 inner realms we've learned from. You know, even though there's 5 people only listening to this talk. But Norman Cousins, the person's last name is actually Cousins. So the cousins of cousins. Norman Cousins says infinity converts the possible into the inevitable. Guys, I think I've literally opened, you know, accessed one of the most rarest code pages on the internet. What is this? Okay, let's finish this quote tunnel. William Blake says, hold infinity in the palm of your hand. We read that. Rumi says, a breath of love can take you all the way to infinity. Henry H. Arnold says, your limits are somewhere up there, waiting for you to reach beyond infinity. Michael Jackson says, the meaning of life is contained in every single expression of life. It is present in the infinity of forms and phenomena that exist in all of creation. Okay, like, if Michael Jackson said that, I'm impressed. Rabindranath Tagore says, we cross infinity with every step. We meet eternity in every second. And guys, this falls in line, this has parallels to certain wisdom that this Indian yogi named Kabir would give. Somebody asked him, how long does it take to get enlightened? Like, that's a good question, if you think enlightenment is an activity for itself. And Kabir looks at the person and says, it takes you half of an instant. Literally, he's telling you, get out of thought, buddy, and then ask the question. then wonder experientially about the true nature of the question. Because sometimes I've even had questions, and ever since I heard Elon Musk say that if they make you ask the wrong questions, they don't have to worry about your answer, something like that. Some idea like this, that it's the question is the hardest part. It makes you kind of see a new dimension in life, that most people feel happiness means them always having an answer to life. But in reality, there is so much more unknown. So it's like it's not just dark matter and dark energy. Everything endlessly has a sort of abyssness to it. It's kind of like Friedrich Nietzsche. He's like, he says something like those who fight monsters have to be careful not in the process becoming monsters themselves. And he says, he who stares into the abyss, the abyss stares back into him. And what does that mean? That means if you look at the unknown too long, you may feel the known is not enough. So then it comes a sort of escapist metaphysics. You see, for me, you can think about it as just hands given. So imagine every person born at any moment in history. It's like just like Texas Hold'em. You're given this. These are the cards you're dealt. So it's like right now, me being born in 2020, everything I see, this live streaming technology, civilization, the various hierarchies that are kind of projected forth in this civilization. That's the thing. Ideology was never meant to make us ignore matter. Ideology is a tool. Like, imagine there's no good and bad. Imagine it's all geometry. Imagine it's all design. Literally, right now, you're in a river of design. You open your eyes as a sort of witnessing sight in a river of phenomenological design. So much phenomenology has a design. And the cool thing is, because you as a human being, there has never been a person like you ever in existence. We're not like clones. Every person is unique. That kind of implies that it's like you don't even know your potential and the world doesn't know your potential. So technically, the concept of a teacher dismantles when you really realize your moment of being is really where experience is happening. So how you are being will become as important to what you do if you realize that there's unconscious loops, certain things that repeat. I mean, it's kind of like very seasonal. It's like the person saying, I want to get out of this cycle of karma, but cycle of karma is literally like how the universe is inhaling and exhaling. It's like the waves of an ocean. I'm telling you, the best way to speak is with your inner realms being faster than your outer realms. Then you don't. Then everything is there automatically. It's as if like that river of thought, your attention open to, you're no longer a drop of belief when you're headed for the ocean of direct experience. Really. Herbie Hancock says life is not about finding our limitations; it's about finding our infinity. Simone de Beauvoir, a very crucial French philosopher, and I can say that she was very crucial in taking a stance uh, towards freedom. Uh, Guys, like, let me tell you something. I saw this interview of Simone de Beauvoir, and the interviewer was excuse my language, but the interviewer was an a-hole, you know? And the reason was that the interviewer had literally placed, like, Simone de Beauvoir, her back was to this wall. Beside her, she was two objects, and the interviewer had just kind of trapped her in an uncomfortable physical place for the interview. But she had found a sort of liberation. Like, there's nothing more incredible than suddenly seeing uh, life know its own value. It's as you know, some modern podcasters would say, tremendous. Simone de Beauvoir says, I am incapable of conceiving infinity, and yet I do not accept finity. How incredible is that? We're kind of left in the middle way, you know? They ask Buddha, is like, yo, is it this way or that way? And Buddha's like, I don't know, man. I guess it's the middle way. And we have a quote from Deepak Chopra. You and I are essentially infinite choice makers. Okay. And then he says, in every moment of our existence, we're in that field of all possibilities where we have access to an infinity of choices. I mean, of course, he's a doctor, I believe, Deepak Chopra. I remember, like, I was uh, born in 1991, guys. Like, I have a view of Deepak Chopra that the modern world doesn't have. Deepak Chopra, anyways, he's saying pretty much here, just to simplify it in my own way, he's saying you are infinite choice. That means he's saying you're like endless potential energy. And he's saying in every moment of your existence, so it's like before potential energy becomes kinetic, you know, guys, pretty much science should make itself kind of easier, and uh, the scientific endeavor should choose to have studies of conscious energy and the study of unconscious energy. Because energy, like I looked at religion, guys, and I looked at, let me say it like this, I looked at life through the religious lens, and I looked at life through the scientific lens, the scientific method, really. Science is, everything in this life is an approach of human needs. The world is made from our exploration into it, is discovered by our advancement into it. I don't know how to say it, guys, but I noticed that it's kind of hilarious. I remember I asked a religious person, when I say the word God, what image comes to your mind? And the person was like, God doesn't have an image, right? It's inconceivable. It's the inconceivable creator where all its will is occurring simultaneously. You know, that means it's as if like we are the imagination of a higher dimensional entity that is inconceivable to us, but not to itself. So I looked at it and I'm like, from the religious lens, the idea of God is something that is not created and destroyed. And go ask any monotheistic person, you're going to see that it is the concept of God surpasses the creator, birth and death. So God cannot be created and destroyed. Then we kind of also see in science, it's as if there is one word, only one word, that has the same definition. And it is energy that can't be created or destroyed. Do you know? That means it's as if there is something, it's as if the whole universe is still being perceived energetically as liquid in a jar, where how the jar moves suggests what happens to the liquid, you know, how the liquid is contained. And I'm going to read one quote from Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche says sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. Friedrich Nietzsche says there will always be rocks in the road ahead of us. They will be stumbling blocks or stepping stones. They will be stumbling blocks or stepping stones. It all depends on how you use them. And that's the thing, how you use what you are observing as an observer. Friedrich Nietzsche says, I was in darkness, but I took 3 steps and found myself in paradise. The first step was a good thought, the second a good word, and the third a good deed. This is I think from Thus Zarathustra, maybe, which is Zoroastrian ideology, which somehow had made an impression on Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche says, and those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. And guys, Mr. Within is saying we have to start dancing to the music of an advanced civilization. We have to start living as if an advanced civilization is already here and we're wondering next. It's like Mr. Within is saying, don't think 1 step ahead, think 10,000 years ahead. Attempt it. Just attempt the extreme edges of the ability of your mind to acknowledge phenomenology as intelligence and its own organization. Freedom is also the freedom of expression. That means there's 2 kinds of freedom. It's like if somebody was wondering what's a freedom before freedom of speech, a philosopher could argue it's freedom of vision. That means it's like all words are kind of like symbols used to communicate an image in accordance to either the self, the world, or the void where it all stands. And I think that is this quote by Friedrich Nietzsche is his. I don't know. This man was way ahead of his time. He was like a antenna, you know. Okay, guys, I'm back. Got coffee, even though it's 11:22 p.m. I looked at, while I was kind of making this coffee, I was thinking about Terence McKenna's work. And I was thinking about this idea that Terence McKenna, he said, he has this quote where he says, a culture evolves as fast as its language does. So that means the language that we're using to define truth is also evolving, you know? And so that's the cool thing. I think we've always had a mind from the beginning, but it's that matter was moving faster than it. And after a certain phase, the mind moved faster than matter. But the mind is not like an individual transmigrating soul going like, all right, this incarnation, that incarnation. What is this whack-a-mole incarnation? You know, whack-a-mole karma. You pop your head out of each form. I don't think that's the case. I think, excuse me. Sorry, guys. All right, to continue. Pretty much, I feel we have to attempt now to start doing activities to become more responsible in our individual life for the intelligence of how the whole moment is being viewed technically as far as the mind's concerned. I mean, the brain, yes, it is inside your skull, but how all the sensory perception is received through a singular point of self, it's as if the ego has a center of gravity for all the other ideologies that are allowed from that archetypal position. Guys, I just looked at the chat section. I'm going to tell you guys a nice story that I don't think many know. Maybe I've said it once before in the first 30 talks I was giving. Before I started this Mr. Within's gift channel, I actually had this YouTube channel called, the SoundCloud page called Mr. Within's Dream, right? And before, you guys might not realize it, but I really went deep in, like, I don't know, every day I was just promoting people's music on SoundCloud, you know? So there was that Mr. Within idea, and I remember I would look up these quotes and I would upload every track with a quote connected to it. And I was like, what happens if we keep in cyberspace, relaying quotes? I mean, you got to think about it. It is kind of like a river of information, the internet, isn't it? Anyways, guys, I'm gonna kind of jump into the talk again. At the end, there's gonna be Q&A, so anybody can just ask questions at the end of the talk. I'm gonna just scroll down, this elder scroll of the chat section. I find the greatest ability finds a person when they have that courage of realizing conscious activity starts from its own island, and this island gets rejected. That means the child's mind, like think of it this way, a natural being has a natural way of interpreting the world, but as more unnatural events occur to it, that natural being gets bruised by the phenomenology of a dimension that deviates from its nature. Let's start from this idea. Okay, let's treat the mind as space, like an empty canvas. Let's treat sounds, words, ideas as pictures and patterns and shapes drawn on this canvas. Now, I'm a person who, let's just think for a second, objective reality is like a multiplayer online video game, and we all in front of our eyes are in the same physical earth, okay? Same physical world setting, right? We're characters in the same video game of matter, objective reality. But we each are also like that video gamer who's behind the screen and is navigating, for example, the character. So there is a dimension to us that has nothing to do with the dimension we're currently in. You know. So if we were to think that, to be honest, like the actual title of this episode, I wanted to be. I remember I wrote it. What was it? Zero. Zero is a bridge between infinity and one. And the idea was that that ring of the absent heaven, the way the dimensions are kind of placed and how there's a sort of recycling of phenomenology into various classifications of itself. That means I've had moments in this life, guys, that have been incredibly beautiful, and it has had nothing to do with how I moved in the moment or what I wanted in the moment or what I thought I was. All those questions were like a curtain that was pushed aside, and I was in this silence. I felt like silence is eternal. I felt like stillness was eternal, and I feel the moment the mind can just let itself be with the world, it becomes the world. And that's the fascinating thing. We are at a point where every person needs to contribute and share their inner realms because there is nowhere else you can. There is no other time for it. Every day happens once. And most human activity is just physical activity that's not even being recorded. You know what I mean? That means we're at a point where somehow, sometimes when I look back at those people who kind of defended, protected libraries and the scribes of ancient times, I'm like, holy, it's like a miracle, just like, you know, for example, the person is like, how could the early human beings, for example, know about, you know, childbirth, you know, the exact processes of childbirth, for example, the earliest human beings, you know, it's like so far away. After some point, you're like, you know, I don't know how to say it, but I'm envisioning right now, if this civilization was advanced, what kind of psychology would complement it? And you don't know. Sometimes some things that I often think about are very like, I don't know. It's like, when else do we have a chance or an opportunity to study how we're being an entity, how we're being a creature? It's like while you're a creature, study your creaturehood. You know, the moment you move beyond the creature, either you in some sense your attention moves towards the void, or it moves towards the infinite. I would say. I, you know, guys, I mean, I guess certain views I have are controversial, but I'll tell you, they're controversial. Everything's controversial in this reality. When you look at how much of life is happening behind people's eyes, it's just mind-boggling. You know, it's mind-boggling that we appear to each other as objects. Like when I look at you, if you were here, whoever you listen to this, if you were here and I looked at you, you would appear as an object to me. But if I wondered about myself, I appear as a subject, that self, that biography of the life I feel I'm an actor in. It's kind of like the ultimate state of mind is attained when you realize there are no rules. That's why there can be any rule. This is for the inner realms. This is for navigating as attention in subjective landscape. Imagine that right now you are a singular dimensional being, that it's just you here. Imagine the world is your mind. Now, imagine before the world was your mind, you were the mind of the world. It's like an inconceivable evolution from a conscious individual object into an unconscious collective subject and beyond, where it's like the fabric of reality is shifting the more we become acquainted of our attention. And this is what I honestly deep down feel. I feel it's as if like every person's intelligence is a puzzle. It's like an instrument that you have to endlessly not practice blindly, not like you have to fall in love with the only life you have ever known. Beyond a dualistic framework, realistically, it would either be a silent civilization or a civilization where the inner self is moving at speeds where we can't identify. Like it's, you know what that means? That means like there's fish in the ocean, a school of fish, a group of fish that when a shark or something comes nearby, they gather in groups to intimidate the shark. And the shark is like, yo, these small fish are acting weird, and the shark gets out of there. The shark is like, yo, these small fish ain't so small no more. Right now, if I am being a memory for my future self, if currently how I'm existing in the present moment, is literally sculpting the memory of my future self. And if my future self is eventually to emptiness, so it's kind of like in life, you can go on believing, thinking, seeing, doing whatever you like, but at the end, there is an empty handedness that the mind, the unknown mind, will have to confront. So right now, it's like we know knowledge in a certain way, but the unknown is not something that has any structure to it. Right now, it's as if we are a language of nature. It's as if the earth is speaking through the expression of human beings. You know, it's like evolution in its complexity is an urge towards a no rational reason for continuing. That means it's like I could totally understand survival of the fittest before the creature was conscious of itself. After the creature is conscious of itself, there's way more dimensions than just fitting with the world. I think it's like you don't just want your body to be alive, you want your mind to be alive. And so many people, for example, go to the gym, but what is the gym for the mind? And so the only gym for the mind was the explorer spirit that would find the person when they would look at reality and see what it is. You know, that means I feel that sometimes my imagination is how my eyes, literally my eyes are stargates, and it's as if objective reality instantly translates into subjective significance, and it's as if an object has an object is like a rock where there is gum underneath the rock, and you lift up the rock and you see the gum. I don't know why I'm choosing this metaphor. I don't know. Let's imagine a time traveler accidentally dropped a string of gum and a caveman endlessly with a rock and smashed it. I feel if language is a bridge between the inner realms of two people, you know, in this objective video game, subjects are commonality. Sometimes it's never like you know how in common language they say getting to know people. I don't think it's ever the case. I don't think we ever get to know people. I feel we just get a different angle on our own experiences when we notice a different pattern, whatever it is, you know. And so I'm telling you, you can become such an advanced communicator on this planet, where it has to do with acknowledging the presence of the moment. I'm telling you, if you are comfortable with stillness and silence, language can't touch you. There's a quote by Rumi. He says, "Out beyond." Sorry, guys, I think I'm speaking in the porch. I think I'm speaking too loud. I'm just going to speak at this volume. Rumi says, "Out beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, there is a place." He says, "I will meet you there." And he says, when the soul sits on that grass, the world is too full to talk about. I feel language is a bridge between the eyes of the worlds that are behind the eyes of a person. That means if there's two people, what is behind their eyes can only be an expression in the same domain. It's as if like the restaurant is the bridge for the date. We're from two different realms and modes of reality, human beings, for example. move. For example, I don't know. There was at some point, I don't know if this was before or after the Renaissance, but there was a period of romanticism where it was human beings. They kind of saw the suffering of life and they escaped it through their hidden romance of the worlds behind each other's eyes. There is something like that. I mean, it's like it's of course because we've been conditioned to think that everything is an object. When we look at people, I mean, every person is an object. I mean, yeah, you've seen some people say, "Don't objectify me." Well, that just means don't objectify them in front of them too. Then. But every person you look at is technically an object, right? And everybody is objectified by others too. That means you don't see, or like the eyes are placed not above the head in like a in a viewpoint where it's like an RPG game sort of consciousness. It's as if our souls poetically are in the body; they're not outside of the body looking at the body. There have been certain esoteric schools of thought where the person eventually acknowledged such an inseparability between the individual activity and the cosmic activity that uh, I don't know. It's like half of your life you live as a body, half of it you realize from the beginning you were a mind, and you just endure through it, realizing nature is breathing through every moment. So that's the ultimate practice. That you go in nature, sit still and silent, and breathe, and acknowledge that you are a natural phenomenon, and phenomena comes to an end in the human experience, for the human experience. The Buddha, he has these three things, he calls them the three pearls, not three pearls, the three jewels of Buddhism. And it is any human being that gets an ability to acknowledge that there's impermanence, and any human being who gets an ability to acknowledge that there is imperfection, and any human being who sees that there's incompleteness. That means this world is not designed for desire to make sense. Because your desire can be an endless either expansion or regression. You can endlessly desire to reverse engineer back into the truth. You know, you can endlessly choose to, for example, expand to the infinite unknown. And so it's like, civilization is a coagulation of various efforts of eyes to try to see something that they can build together. That means in this life, if you're a human being, you're not just here to uh, watch this, you're here to participate in whatever this world is for you. This participation, usually most people, they selfish. What does that mean? They're selfish. They're so busy selling fish that they don't realize that it is sometimes you got to be able to see more than yourself. That means there was a time I would listen to people and I would judge them based on their actions and I would judge them based on their words. How foolish was I? That you can never judge a dynamic, unknown process of nature. That the human being is a traveler through various states of mind that give rise to a sort of psychological substratum of how, like, it's like the world is being the context and we're being the concept. Now, Mr. Within is saying, in front of your eyes, there is an objective context, and you are an objective concept. Okay, but behind your eyes, there is a subjective context, but you are simultaneously being a subjective concept. So that means you are being the same self of two dimensions. Do you know what that means? That means the person on the bridge is between worlds. And how much of life surpasses just a story of satisfaction? It's like, what is truth to people? It's like, are we all wearing top hats, smoking pipes, and truth suddenly somebody brings us? It's like, we found truth, sir, and we're excellent. It's like it's not the case. As Alfred Whitehead said, it's as if life is not just particles hovering in the middle of nowhere meaninglessly. It's a process. It's like we're growing with the world as it's happening, and we are. It's our free will that gives us an ability to be individual. So right now, we think we are only individuals, and there's been so many stories painted on what the human being is that people are finding it hard to wonder about reality. But let me tell you, before technology, before the information revolution, the information age gained momentum, it was a situation where people actually had only questions. They didn't have answers. Life didn't begin with answers. It began with questions. That means it was like, I think this is like somebody says, "What is human life like?" It's like you open your eyes and you're like, "What the fuck?" That's human life, guys. It's a glorious known journey through the unknown. And when we become comfortable with the unknown, the para Brahman, the world soul, speaks. But it speaks through how a phenomena happens in accordance to you vibing with the important, finding, like, pretty much. I think this is the easiest, the quickest way. Like, I was thinking, advanced civilization is going to have much faster speed in solving issues, so it has to create more of a advanced uh, destination. You know, so any moment in life when emptiness is observed, there is a simultaneity of experience of the singular and infinite. That means that the number zero, if people were wondering what is the number before zero, it's infinity. I'm going to actually attempt this in mathematics. I'm going to go roar this to mathematicians. Before there was zero, there was infinity. And before there was that infinity, there was a duality. We're an endless regression of a world, of an attention oscillating from a self in a world to being the world moving the self. Because after you die, even if there is something continuous, it's not a self. Like, there's a potential that it doesn't rise as a self. So your attention is coming to to believe it or not, nature as it is moving its own truth. Because, like, I remember when I was in what do you call it? When I was living in Iran, it was as if, like, you would go in the streets and you would see some people with rosaries, like, tasbih in their hand, and like a kid would do parkour, and those guys would say, like, mashallah, mashallah. Mashallah means God's will, right? So you got to realize, anytime we're talking about religion, we are looking at the cosmos as if it is in the control. It is all God's expression, as if man is God's artwork. Who knew God was a painter? The world we live in, and the world that lives in us. The eyes that were here before we could see. The mind that was the echo of stardust becoming conscious. So, guys, sorry, it's like late at night and I'm talking here outside, like a public space. So, anyways, that's the end of the talk, guys. I think I've spoken about the bridge between the infinite and the singular, and you know, zero, zero is the bridge between the infinite and the singular. That means don't fear the void, study it. So, that's for the talk, guys. Thanks for listening. I'm gonna open it up to Q&A for 10 minutes, and if there's any questions, I'll step out of the void and I'll step back into cyberspace to answer your question. Blessings. Okay, guys, so Aziz asks an interesting question. Aziz says, so there's a thing in bringing down the infinite to the singular. Is that a problem or is it natural? Okay. I think the thing is, like, the way I define it, Aziz, to give an answer to your question, is I say we can land, like, I kind of see the rishis in India, they would land perception from more liberated frameworks. They were pilots. They would pilot between interdimensional frameworks of reality. So what does that mean? That means you can suddenly experience a moment with no personality, just taking in the whole moment. Then you can be like a very individualized person, for example, like giving a speech or something. I'm saying that it's like it's all in all the secret of all of it is in the attention. How the attention is just being. So guys, I gotta apologize to the viewers because I gotta actually head out. You know. But anyways, thanks for tuning in and uh, keep writing. And if you don't, talking to your future self.